there are things that surprise even me. There's a bunch of amazing facts out there you weren't aware of. Let me tell you some of them. I'm the useless guy. And here I am with amazing facts you didn't know.
So many questions. Why is the world spinning? Why is the moon keeping its orbit? Can rockets fly backwards? The facts you didn't know you needed. The Useless Show.
A sentence like, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," isn't just sharing information, it's actually doing something. That's the core idea behind speech act theory, a branch of pragmatics that looks at how language can perform actions. Introduced by philosophers like J.L. Austin and later John Searle, this theory explains how saying things like promises, apologies, or commands isn't just about words, but about doing something through them. If you measure a quantum system constantly, you can actually freeze its state. This strange effect is called the quantum Zeno effect, named after the philosopher Zeno, who imagined paradoxes where motion seems impossible. In quantum physics, the act of observation interferes with the system. So if you keep checking a particle fast enough, it stops evolving, kind of like watching a pot so closely that it literally never boils. In the late 1500s, astronomer Tycho Brahe proposed a model of the solar system that tried to keep everyone happy. Known as the Tychonic system, it placed Earth at the center, but let the other planets orbit the Sun, which in turn orbited Earth. It was an attempt to merge the observational accuracy of Copernicus with the philosophical comfort of geocentrism, especially before telescopes confirmed otherwise. 1 Pascal may not feel like much. It's the pressure of 1 Newton per square meter. But stack up enough of them, and you've got hurricanes or deep-sea crushing forces. Named after Blaise Pascal, the unit is a standard in physics and engineering. A tire, for instance, is often inflated to about 200,000 pascals. So, while one is tiny, they add up fast in real-world pressure. When solving a crystal's structure using X-ray diffraction, scientists hit a wall called the phase problem. The Patterson function helps get around it. Named after Arthur Lindo Patterson in 1934, this mathematical tool reveals distances between atoms without needing exact phase data. It's like seeing footprints in snow. Even if you didn't watch someone walk, you can guess how far apart their steps were. The helical model of communication suggests that communication isn't a straight line. It's more like a spiral. Proposed by Frank Dance in 1967, the model shows how conversations build over time, with each interaction adding a twist to the helix. So, your chats with a friend aren't just exchanges. They're connected layers, shaped by everything you've already said and everything still unsaid. The Beaufort scale turns wind into numbers you can actually see. Created by Admiral Francis Beaufort in 1805, it links wind speed to visual effects, from calm seas with smooth, glassy water to hurricane with waves over 14 meters high. A strong breeze point, for example, might snap twigs off trees. It's a practical system sailors and meteorologists still use to describe weather without needing instruments. A phononic crystal is a man-made material designed to control sound. Its internal structure has a repeating pattern that affects how vibrations, like sound waves, move through it. That's similar to how photonic crystals control light. These materials can block, bend, or trap sound in ways that natural materials can't, making them useful in soundproofing, ultrasound imaging, or even cloaking devices. Groupthink happens when a group values harmony so much it ends up making bad decisions. Coined by Irving Janis in 1972, the idea explains how people might ignore warning signs or silence doubts just to keep everyone happy. It's been used to analyze major failures, like the Bay of Pigs invasion. In groupthink, it's not stupidity. It's too much agreement that causes the damage. Bell's theorem, published in 1964 by physicist John Bell, draws a bold line between classical physics and quantum mechanics. It shows that no local theory, where objects are only affected by nearby things, can explain the strange correlations predicted by quantum entanglement. In other words, quantum particles seem to know about each other instantly, even when separated, challenging our ideas of space, time, and realism. A Bose-Einstein condensate is what happens when matter gets extremely cold, just a whisper above absolute zero. Predicted by Satyendranath Bose and Albert Einstein, and first made in 1995, this state causes a group of bosons to occupy the same quantum state, behaving as one big quantum particle. It's as if atoms, usually independent, suddenly march in lockstep, blurring the line between particles and waves. Ukalamba Drakensberg Park in South Africa is both a natural wonder and a cultural archive. Stretching across the Drakensberg Mountains, it holds dramatic peaks and valleys, but also over 35,000 sandrock art images, some thousands of years old. Named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2000, the park's name means Barrier of Spears in Zulu, echoing its striking landscape and long human history. In Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, there's a petroglyph nicknamed the Hand of God. It shows a crescent moon, a handprint, and a starburst, possibly a depiction of the supernova from July 1054 CE, which created the Crab Nebula. Chinese astronomers recorded it at the time, and it was visible in daylight for weeks. The carving suggests indigenous people might have witnessed it too, etched into stone. The Phillips head screw wasn't just built for grip, it was built to slip. Designed by Henry F. Phillips in the 1930s, it was made so that the driver cams out, or slips free when too much torque is applied. That might seem like a flaw, but it actually prevents over-tightening and damage during automated assembly, especially useful in car manufacturing, where speed and consistency are key. That new car smell isn't a single scent. It's a cocktail of over 50 volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These come from glues, plastics, sealants, and fabrics, all slowly releasing chemicals into the air as the car ages. Compounds like toluene and formaldehyde contribute to the smell. Some people find it nostalgic, others headache-inducing. Either way, it's not really fresh, it's chemistry at work. When high winds pass through the sidewalk slats of the Golden Gate Bridge, the bridge actually hums. It's not a metaphor. It's an eerie musical tone caused by air vibrating through the railings after a retrofit in 2020. The sound can be heard miles away and has a distinct pitch, like a giant tuning fork in the fog. Engineers are still exploring ways to quiet it down. A zon is a narrow, sea-cut inlet carved into cliffs, usually found on rugged coastlines like Cornwall or Western Wales. These steep-sided gullies form as waves erode cracks in the rock, gradually expanding them into deep channels. Some are dramatic enough to swallow small boats, while others barely fit a kayak. The word zon itself comes from Cornish, capturing both the geography and its maritime roots. The Dresselhaus effect shows up in certain crystals, where the interaction between an electron's spin and its motion causes energy levels to split. This phenomenon plays a major role in spintronics, a field that uses electron spin to store or transfer information. So instead of just charging, you're using spin like a tiny compass. The weapons effect is a psychological finding where just seeing a weapon can increase aggressive behavior. First demonstrated in a 1967 study by Leonard Berkowitz and Anthony LePage, participants exposed to guns acted more aggressively than those who weren't. It doesn't mean everyone becomes violent, but it suggests that weapons can trigger hostile associations, subtly influencing how people think and act in tense moments. The nocebo effect is the darker cousin of the placebo. If you expect a harmless pill to cause nausea, you might start feeling sick, just because you thought you would. It's a psychological response where negative expectations cause real symptoms. The term nocebo, Latin for I shall harm, was coined in the 1960s, and it shows how belief itself can shape the experience of pain or illness. The marshmallow test, first run by Walter Mischel in the 1960s, studied how kids handle delayed gratification. A child was offered one marshmallow now, or two if they could wait alone for about 15 minutes. Follow-up studies found that kids who waited often had better life outcomes later. But more recent research suggests it's not just willpower. Things like trust, socioeconomic status, and environment also matter a lot. Gregson maxims are the unspoken rules we usually follow in conversation. Philosopher H.P. Grice outlined four in the 1970s. Quality, be truthful. Quantity, be informative but not too much. Relation, be relevant. And manner, be clear. When people break these, like exaggerating or going off topic, we often pick up on it instantly. These maxims help make conversation feel natural, even if we've never thought about them before. Before pitch was standardized, musicians had a problem. The note A wasn't always the same. In the 1700s and 1800s, it could vary wildly, sometimes as low as 392 Hz. Other times above 450 Hz. That's almost a major third apart, enough to make ensemble playing across cities very tricky. Today, Concert A is set at 440 Hz, but even now, some orchestras still prefer a slightly higher pitch. In 9 CE, deep within the dense woods of the Teutoburg forest, 3 Roman legions led by Publius Quinctilius Varus were ambushed by Germanic tribes under a chieftain named Arminius. Over the course of several days, around 15,000 Roman soldiers were wiped out in a brutal, rain-soaked trap. The defeat was so complete that Rome abandoned its plans to expand across the Rhine, an imperial retreat rarely seen in its history. The Peloponnesian War was a long and bitter conflict between Athens and Sparta that reshaped ancient Greece. From 431 to 404 BCE, the Athenian-led Delian League fought the Spartan-led Peloponnesian League in a clash of ideologies, naval power and democracy versus land power and oligarchy. Thucydides, who lived through it, chronicled the war, which ended in Athens' defeat and ushered in a decline of classical Greek power. The karuka was a heavy iron-tipped plow that transformed European agriculture in the Middle Ages. Appearing in the 9th century, it had large wheels and a mold board that turned over thick, clay-rich soils, especially in northern Europe, where earlier wooden plows failed. It required teams of oxen, but in return, it allowed deeper, more efficient farming. Villages even reorganized their land around it, creating long, narrow fields. The Dilbert Principle is a satirical twist on office life, coined by cartoonist Scott Adams in the 1990s. It suggests that companies tend to promote their least competent workers into management, not because they're leadership material, but because they're less likely to cause harm there. While meant as humor, it struck a chord with many office workers who'd seen baffling promotions firsthand. Sometimes, satire hits uncomfortably close. The gambler's fallacy is the mistaken belief that past random events affect future ones. For example, if a coin lands on heads 5 times in a row, some might think tails is due next. But the odds haven't changed. It's still 50-50. This cognitive bias can lead gamblers to make risky bets, misreading patterns where none exist, and assuming luck has a memory it simply doesn't. The smell of an old book comes from chemistry, not nostalgia. As paper ages, its cellulose and lignin begin to break down, releasing aromatic compounds like vanillin, benzaldehyde, and ethyl hexanoate. Together, they create that warm, slightly sweet scent often compared to vanilla or almonds. Environmental conditions like humidity or sunlight speed up the process, meaning your favorite musty library scent is really a slow kind of decay. Helsinki, Finland's capital, is a city where modern Nordic design meets icy seascapes. Officially founded in 1550 by Swedish King Gustav I, it sits on the edge of the Baltic Sea and stretches across more than 300 islands. Known for landmarks like the Helsinki Cathedral and the bold geometry of Alvar Aalto's architecture, the city balances classical European roots with minimalist modern aesthetics, and a lot of winter light shows. Denisova Cave sits in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia and holds a surprising chapter of human history. In 2008, a tiny finger bone found there revealed a previously unknown group of ancient humans, the Denisovans. Genetic analysis showed they were distinct from both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, yet interbred with both. The cave, with its deep archaeological layers, has become a key site for understanding human evolution. The Library of Alexandria, one of the most famous libraries of the ancient world, reportedly had a policy that any ship docking in its harbor had to surrender its scrolls. These were copied by scribes, and the originals were kept, while the copies were returned to the owners. Whether fully true or not, the story reflects the library's mission, to gather all human knowledge, even by slightly sneaky means. The Porte-Van-le-Chatelier effect is an odd behavior in certain metals like aluminum or steel when stretched. Under specific temperatures and strain rates, the metal doesn't deform smoothly. It jerks and forms visible bands. Discovered in the early 20th century, the effect is caused by interactions between dislocations and diffusing atoms. It's a problem in manufacturing because it makes metal weaker and harder to predict during shaping. Chauvet Cave, hidden in the cliffs of southern France, contains some of the oldest and most detailed cave art ever discovered. Dating back over 30,000 years, the walls show lions, rhinoceroses, and bears drawn with remarkable shading and motion. Unlike many later caves, Chauvet's paintings are vivid and complex, as if the artist already knew techniques we'd call advanced. The cave remained sealed for millennia, preserving it almost untouched. Tempering is a heat treatment process that makes steel tougher, less brittle, more durable. After steel is hardened by rapid cooling, it can become too hard and prone to cracking. Tempering involves reheating it to a lower temperature, then cooling it again. This process reduces internal stress while maintaining strength. You'll find tempered steel in tools, knives, and structural parts where both hardness and resilience are needed. The butterfly effect, popularized in chaos theory, describes how tiny changes in initial conditions can lead to drastically different outcomes. The metaphor, where a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil and triggers a tornado in Texas, illustrates how complex systems like weather or ecosystems are incredibly sensitive. The concept emerged from meteorologist Edward Lorenz's work in the 1960s, showing that even small rounding errors in data could change a forecast entirely. The epicycle was a clever workaround in ancient astronomy. To explain why planets sometimes appeared to move backward in the sky, Ptolemy proposed that they moved in small circles, epicycles, while also orbiting Earth on larger circles, deferents. It was mathematically useful but physically incorrect. The model lasted over 1,000 years until Copernicus and Kepler redefined planetary motion with ellipses and heliocentrism. The Alcubierre drive is a speculative idea from theoretical physics suggesting a way to travel faster than light, without breaking the laws of relativity. Proposed in 1994 by physicist Miguel Alcubierre, the concept involves compressing space in front of a ship and expanding it behind, like surfing a wave of space-time. It would require exotic matter with negative energy, which has never been found, making the drive purely hypothetical for now. Karate is a martial art that developed in the Ryukyu Kingdom, now Okinawa, Japan, under Chinese influence. Originally shaped by native fighting systems and imported techniques, it evolved into a striking art emphasizing punches, kicks, and open-hand techniques. By the 20th century, karate had spread to mainland Japan and then globally. Its name means empty hand, highlighting its emphasis on unarmed self-defense and disciplined movement. Altamira is a cave in northern Spain, known for its vivid prehistoric paintings. Discovered in the 19th century, the site features bison, deer, and mysterious symbols painted over 20,000 years ago by Paleolithic artists. The ceiling's polychrome bison are so lifelike that early skeptics dismissed them as forgeries, but radiocarbon dating proved otherwise. These were the real expressions of Ice Age humans, preserved in darkness for millennia. During the Apollo missions, astronauts performed something called the barbecue roll. It sounds like lunch, but it was a slow rotation of the spacecraft to evenly distribute solar heat. Without it, one side would overheat while the other froze. By spinning the craft like a rotisserie chicken, once every 20 minutes or so, they avoided dangerous temperature differences. It was one of many quiet, essential maneuvers that kept astronauts alive. The magic bullet theory suggests that mass media messages are directly absorbed by audiences without question, like a bullet hitting its target. Popular in the early 20th century, this model assumed the public was passive and easily influenced, especially during times like World War I. Later theories became more nuanced, but the idea lingered that one message, delivered clearly enough, could shape thoughts or behavior with near-instant impact. A carbon nanotube is a cylinder made entirely of carbon atoms arranged in a hexagonal lattice, with a diameter often just a few nanometers wide. Discovered in the early 1990s, these structures are incredibly strong, light, and conductive, properties that make them useful in electronics, materials science, and medicine. Imagine something stronger than steel, lighter than plastic, and capable of conducting electricity better than copper, all in a microscopic tube. Exotic matter is the name given to any theoretical form of matter that breaks the usual rules, like having negative mass or defying known energy conditions. It's not antimatter or dark matter, but something even stranger. Some versions appear in speculative physics ideas, like wormholes or warp drives, where negative energy is needed to bend space. None of it has been confirmed in labs, but it remains mathematically possible. Venice rests on millions of wooden piles, mostly alder, driven deep into the muddy lagoon floor. Laid down as early as the 5th century, these piles supported stone foundations above the waterline. Surprisingly, the wood hasn't rotted because it's underwater and cut off from oxygen, which bacteria need to survive. Over time, minerals in the water petrified the wood, turning Venice's invisible skeleton into something closer to stone. Metamaterials are engineered materials with properties not found in nature. Their structure, not just their composition, controls how they interact with waves, like light, sound, or radio. Some can bend light backward, creating the illusion of invisibility. Others can focus electromagnetic waves in ways normal materials can't. It's not science fiction. It's physics with very precise geometry, often on the scale of micrometers or nanometers. Loop quantum gravity is a theoretical attempt to bridge two major theories of physics, general relativity and quantum mechanics. Instead of treating space as a smooth fabric, it suggests that space itself is made of tiny, discrete loops, kind of like a woven net. These loops form a granular structure of space-time at the Planck scale, far too small to observe directly, but mathematically consistent with both gravity and quantum theory. Serra da Capivara National Park in northeastern Brazil is famous for its dramatic rock formations and for some of the oldest known prehistoric rock art in the Americas. The park contains over 1,000 archaeological sites, including wall paintings that may be up to 25,000 years old. Designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1991, it also protects a rare patch of dry forest and wildlife unique to the Caatinga biome. Scrimshaw is the art of engraving on bone or ivory, traditionally done by sailors, especially whalers, during the 18th and 19th centuries. Using simple tools like sail needles and pocket knives, they carved intricate scenes on whale teeth, walrus tusks, or bones. Many depicted ships, sea monsters, or loved ones back home. Scrimshaw was both a creative outlet and a way to pass long, monotonous months at sea. In a Roman city, the Forum was more than just a plaza. It was the beating heart of public life. Located at the center of town, it served as a marketplace, courtroom, religious hub, and political stage. Citizens gathered here to hear speeches, vote, or conduct business. The Roman Forum in particular, nestled between the Palatine and Capitoline hills, became a template for civic design for centuries. The Pockels effect describes how the refractive index of a material changes when you apply an electric field. In simpler terms, it means you can bend or slow light by running a voltage through the right kind of crystal. This effect, discovered by Friedrich Pockels in the late 19th century, is crucial in modern optics, especially in devices like modulators that control laser beams in telecommunications. The appeal to probability is a logical fallacy where someone assumes that because something can happen, it definitely will. For instance, saying, "I might win the lottery, so I'm quitting my job," falls into this trap. It confuses possibility with certainty, often leading to decisions based more on hope than on evidence. It's common in everyday thinking, and just as common in poor planning. The Boltzmann equation describes how particles in a fluid behave statistically over time. It links the motion of a single particle to the complex collisions happening between pairs of particles. Developed by Ludwig Boltzmann in the 1870s, the equation is central to kinetic theory. It helps explain how gases flow, mix, or transfer heat. Though built on probability, it underpins many everyday physical processes, from engines to weather systems. Bedbugs reproduce in a way called traumatic insemination, and it's about as pleasant as it sounds. Instead of mating through the female's reproductive tract, the male pierces her abdomen with his needle-like organ and injects sperm directly into her body cavity. The sperm then migrates to the ovaries. It's brutal, biologically costly, and highly effective. Nature, it seems, doesn't always prioritize comfort. Gonite is a rare, zinc-rich mineral in the spinel group, often found in metamorphic rocks. It typically forms as dark green or bluish octahedral crystals, and it can be used as a minor gemstone. Discovered in Sweden and named after chemist Johann Gottlieb Gahn, it's chemically ZnAl2O4. Gonite isn't common, but when it appears, it's often a sign of high-temperature geological processes underground. The affect heuristic is a mental shortcut where emotions drive decision-making more than logic. If something feels good or bad instantly, we're more likely to judge it quickly, whether or not the reasoning holds up. For example, if you like a politician, you might overlook their flaws. Or if a food label seems scary, you might avoid it without understanding what it actually means. Feelings, in this case, steer the facts. In ancient Sparta, the cryptia was a secretive institution where select young men were sent to stalk the countryside and intimidate or kill rebellious helots, the enslaved majority. Part rite of passage, part state terror. It served both to train warriors and control the population. The exact details remain debated, but ancient sources describe it as a kind of sanctioned violence that helped maintain Spartan dominance through fear. Shanidar Cave, nestled in the Zagros Mountains of northern Iraq, contains the remains of Neanderthals who lived around 35,000 to 65,000 years ago. Excavations revealed not just bones, but clues to behavior. One skeleton appeared to be buried with flowers, hinting at ritual or care. Another showed signs of disability and long-term survival, suggesting group support. It's one of the most humanizing glimpses into Neanderthal life ever discovered. The Seebeck effect is what happens when you join two different conductors and create a temperature difference between them. A voltage is generated. This phenomenon, discovered by Thomas Johann Seebeck in 1821, forms the basis of thermocouples, which measure temperature by converting heat into electricity. It's also used in thermoelectric generators, which can power small devices using nothing more than heat gradients, like waste heat from engines. The mathematical constant A, approximately 2.718, first emerged in studies of compound interest in the 17th century. Jacob Bernoulli noticed it when calculating what happens when interest is compounded infinitely often. It later became fundamental in calculus, especially in growth and decay models. Doggerland was a stretch of land that once connected Britain to mainland Europe during and after the last ice age. Around 8,000 years ago, as sea levels rose, this vast lowland plain was slowly swallowed by the North Sea. Archaeologists have found traces of tools, bones, and settlements on the seabed, evidence of a lost Mesolithic world where people hunted, fished, and walked from what's now Norfolk to the Netherlands. Zero-sum bias is the belief that one person's gain must be another's loss, even in situations where mutual benefit is possible. For example, someone might think a co-worker's raise means less money for everyone else, even if the budget allows for both. It's a flawed way of viewing competition, rooted in limited resource thinking. The bias often pops up in politics, economics, or arguments about fairness. Skopje, the capital of North Macedonia, underwent a massive and controversial redesign in the early 21st century, known as Skopje 2014. The project filled the city with neoclassical facades, grand statues, and monumental architecture, intended to evoke a historical identity. Critics said it felt artificial and out of place, while supporters called it national pride. Either way, Skopje's skyline became one of Europe's most visually jarring blends of old and new. Cherry-picking is when someone selects only the evidence that supports their argument while ignoring everything that doesn't. It's a common logical fallacy in debates, media, and even science. For example, pointing to a single cold day as proof that climate change isn't real ignores the broader data. It's not about lying, just being very selective with the truth, which can be just as misleading. Bell's spaceship paradox is a thought experiment that explores how special relativity affects objects in motion. Imagine two identical spaceships connected by a string, accelerating at the same rate. Intuitively, the string should remain taut, but due to Lorentz contraction, it breaks. Shows that relativistic effects like contraction aren't just abstract, they have real physical consequences. Whale semimetals are exotic materials where electrons behave like whale fermions, massless, high-speed particles predicted by quantum field theory. In these materials, electrons follow paths that resemble twisted cones in momentum space, leading to unusual effects like high conductivity and surface states called Fermi arcs. Whale semimetals offer a solid-state glimpse into particle physics and may have future applications in electronics and quantum computing. The ostrich effect is the tendency to avoid or ignore unpleasant information, just like the mythical idea of an ostrich burying its head in the sand. People might skip checking their bank accounts after overspending, or avoid health news when symptoms appear. The term highlights how we cope with anxiety by pretending problems don't exist, even when facing them would actually be more useful in the long run. Coppicing is an ancient method of managing trees by cutting them near the base, prompting new shoots to grow. Used for thousands of years across Europe, it turns a single tree into a source of repeated harvests, ideal for firewood, fencing, and tool handles. Species like hazel and willow respond particularly well. It's low-tech, sustainable, and surprisingly efficient, with coppice trees often outliving those left to grow naturally. Utresis is an archaeological site in Boeotia, central Greece, known for its long history stretching back to the Bronze Age. Excavations have uncovered Mycenaean tombs, Cyclopean walls, and pottery dating as early as 2000 BCE. Mentioned in Homer's Iliad as a city that sent ships to Troy, Utresis played a quiet but steady role in early Greek development, nestled in the fertile valley near modern Leuctra. The ortolan is a small bunting native to Europe, once at the center of a French culinary ritual both elaborate and controversial. Traditionally, the bird was captured, fattened in darkness, and drowned in Armagnac before being roasted and eaten whole under a napkin, possibly to hide the shame. Though considered a delicacy, the practice is now banned due to the bird's protected status and widespread ethical concerns. The ideomotor phenomenon describes how people can make movements without consciously deciding to, tiny muscle actions triggered by thoughts or suggestions. It's the force behind things like Ouija boards or dowsing rods, where the user believes the object is moving on its own. In reality, the unconscious mind is gently guiding the motion. It's subtle enough to feel mysterious, but well documented in psychology. The Solutrean hypothesis suggests that Stone Age Europeans may have crossed the Atlantic and contributed to the early population of North America. Based on similarities between Solutrean stone tools in Europe and Clovis points in America, it proposes a migration around 20,000 years ago. However, mainstream archaeology rejects it due to a lack of genetic and archaeological evidence, and concerns about its speculative foundation. The Penrose process, proposed by physicist Roger Penrose in 1969, describes how energy might be extracted from a rotating black hole. By sending an object into the black hole's ergosphere and having it split, one part falls in while the other escapes with more energy than it started with. Though still theoretical, the idea helped lay the groundwork for later studies of black hole thermodynamics and astrophysical jets. Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, spans 14 islands where Lake Mälaren meets the Baltic Sea. Settled since the 13th century, it's known for its preserved old town, Gamla Stan, with cobblestone streets and medieval buildings. The city blends historic charm with Scandinavian design and features waterways, royal palaces, and museums like the Vasa, which houses a nearly intact 17th century warship raised from the harbor. Warsaw, the capital of Poland, was nearly wiped off the map during World War II. After the failed Warsaw Uprising in 1944, German forces systematically destroyed over 85% of the city. What stands today is largely a careful reconstruction, particularly the Old Town, rebuilt brick by brick using pre-war paintings and plans. It's one of the most ambitious urban restorations in modern history. The Roche limit is the minimum distance a celestial body, held together only by its own gravity, can orbit a larger body without being torn apart by tidal forces. Inside this limit, gravitational differences across the smaller object become too strong, and it disintegrates, possibly forming rings as with Saturn. The concept helps explain why large moons don't form too close to their planets. The Flynn effect is the observed rise in average IQ scores over the 20th century, noted in many countries. Named after James R. Flynn, who studied the trend, it suggests that environmental factors like education, nutrition, and complexity of daily life may improve cognitive performance over time. Interestingly, the effect appears to be plateauing, or even reversing, in some regions in the 21st century. A standard candle in astronomy is an object whose intrinsic brightness is known, allowing astronomers to calculate its distance by comparing how bright it appears from Earth. Type 11A supernovae are the most famous example, used to measure the expansion of the universe. Because their luminosity is consistent, they act like cosmic yardsticks stretched across billions of light years. King Inne of Wessex issued one of the earliest known Anglo-Saxon law codes around 694 AD. Among its detailed rules were fines for injuring a Welshman, with the amount depending on the victim's social status, whether he was free or of higher rank. These laws reflect the complex interactions between Anglo-Saxons and neighboring peoples, and the early attempt to codify social hierarchies under royal authority. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican-American War in 1848. Under its terms, Mexico ceded a massive swath of territory to the United States, including present-day California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and parts of several other states. In return, the U.S. paid $15 million. The treaty redrew borders dramatically and remains a turning point in both countries' histories, setting the stage for Western expansion. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon is the feeling that once you learn something new, like a word, phrase, or idea, you suddenly start seeing it everywhere. It's a cognitive bias combining selective attention and confirmation bias. You weren't noticing it before, but now your brain flags it. The effect is named after a German terrorist group, oddly enough, because someone reportedly first noticed it that way. The just world hypothesis is a mental shortcut that leads people to believe the world is fair, that good actions bring rewards and bad ones bring punishment. It's comforting, but it can lead to blaming victims for their misfortunes, assuming they somehow deserved what happened. Arbitrage is when traders exploit price differences in different markets to make a risk-free profit. For example, if gold sells for slightly less in London than in New York, a trader might buy it in one place and sell it in the other, pocketing the margin. High-frequency trading firms use powerful algorithms to spot these tiny gaps. Though the profit per trade is small, the volume makes it lucrative. The St. Scholastica Day riot broke out in Oxford in 1355 after 2 university students complained about bad wine in a tavern. The quarrel turned violent, drawing in townspeople and students in a 2-day brawl that left nearly 100 people dead. The university was held responsible, and for centuries after, Oxford annually apologized to the town. The Tableau économique, published by François Quesnay in 1758, was the first known attempt to describe an entire economy in analytical terms. Quesnay, a physician and economist in the French court, portrayed economic flows like blood circulating in the body. His model emphasized agriculture as the primary source of wealth, a view later challenged, but it laid a foundation for classical economics and national accounting. The Brillouin zone is a key concept in solid-state physics. It's a uniquely defined cell in reciprocal space, essentially a map of wave behavior in a crystal lattice. These zones help explain the properties of electrons in solids, such as conductivity and band gaps. If real space is where atoms sit, reciprocal space is where their vibrations and energy states are charted. It's abstract but critical to modern electronics. The Hill sphere is the region around a planet or moon, where its gravity dominates over that of a more massive body, like a star. Inside this zone, satellites can orbit stably. Earth's Hill sphere stretches about 1.5 million kilometers, beyond which the sun's pull takes over. Understanding it is crucial when predicting satellite paths or planning space missions that involve multiple gravitational influences. The illusory truth effect is the tendency to believe a statement is true simply because it's been repeated often. First identified in the 1970s, it shows how familiarity can override factual accuracy. Even if a claim is false, hearing it multiple times makes it feel more believable. It's one reason misinformation can spread so effectively, especially in politics and advertising. The prosecutor's fallacy is a misinterpretation of statistical evidence in court, especially around probabilities. It often involves assuming that a rare match, like a DNA profile, means a person must be guilty without considering the broader context. For example, if a DNA test has a 1 in a million chance of matching randomly, and there are 10 million people in a city, there could still be 10 possible matches. Mental accounting is the habit of mentally dividing money into different buckets based on its source or intended use. For example, someone might splurge with a tax refund but pinch pennies with their paycheck, even though both are technically the same money. This bias helps people manage finances intuitively, but can also lead to irrational spending decisions, like treating found money as less valuable. Crown shyness is a phenomenon where the upper canopies of certain tree species grow close but never touch, creating visible gaps in the forest canopy. It's observed in species like the black mangrove and eucalyptus and may reduce the spread of disease or damage from branches clashing in the wind. The exact cause isn't fully agreed upon, but the effect is striking, like trees politely giving each other space. The Code of Hammurabi, created around 1754 BCE in ancient Babylon, assigned punishments based on social class. For instance, Injuring a nobleman brought a harsher penalty than harming a commoner. This legal distinction was carved directly into a tall stone stele, emphasizing that justice wasn't blind. It was ranked. The Kirk effect refers to a sharp performance drop in bipolar junction transistors at high current levels. As current increases, the internal electric field in the base region changes, reducing how effectively the device can control the flow of charge. It's a limitation that engineers must account for in circuit design, especially when pushing the limits of speed or power in semiconductor devices. Obliquity is the tilt of a planet's rotational axis relative to its orbital plane. Earth's obliquity is about 23.5 degrees, and it's what gives us seasons. A higher tilt would mean more extreme seasons, a lower tilt, milder ones. Over thousands of years, Earth's tilt slowly shifts, affecting long-term climate cycles, part of what drives ice ages and warm periods. Brown dwarfs are objects too big to be planets, but too small to ignite sustained hydrogen fusion like stars. With masses between about 13 and 80 times that of Jupiter, they form similarly to stars but don't shine as brightly. They glow faintly in infrared and often lurk undetected in space. Think of them as failed stars, or massive planets that didn't quite make the cut. The Kirk session was the lowest court in the Scottish legal system, but unlike modern courts, it was run by the local church. Active from the 16th to the 19th centuries, it focused not on crime as we know it, but on enforcing moral and religious discipline, things like Sabbath breaking, drunkenness, or scandalous conduct. It was a kind of spiritual small claims court, keeping watch over the soul of the parish. Nganga is an archaeological site located in the Democratic Republic of Congo, offering insights into the ancient cultures of Central Africa. Excavations have uncovered iron smelting furnaces, pottery, and burial sites, dating back over 1,000 years. Though not widely known outside academic circles, Nganga contributes to the broader understanding of early African metallurgy and trade networks, which were more complex and far-reaching than once assumed. The Kirkendall effect describes how two metals can actually cause their shared boundary to shift when they diffuse at different rates. First observed in the 1940s using marker experiments with brass and copper, it's a phenomenon where atoms from one metal migrate faster than those of the other. The sextant is a navigational tool that helped sailors determine their latitude at sea by measuring the angle between the horizon and a celestial body object, usually the sun or a star. Invented in the 18th century, it uses a system of mirrors to allow precise readings of angular distances. Before GPS, this was your best bet for not missing land entirely, or worse, discovering a new continent by accident. A red dwarf is the smallest and coolest type of star still fusing hydrogen in its core. With masses less than half the sun's, these stars burn their fuel slowly, making them incredibly long-lived. Some could last for trillions of years. Despite being the most common stars in the galaxy, they're also some of the dimmest, which makes spotting them from Earth surprisingly difficult without a telescope. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis proposes that the language you speak shapes how you think and perceive the world. For example, if a language has no future tense, its speakers might view future events less urgently. There are two versions. The strong form says language determines thought. The weak form says it just influences it. While the stronger version is mostly rejected, the idea still fuels debate in linguistics and psychology. Gray goo is a hypothetical doomsday scenario from the early days of nanotechnology theory. The idea is that microscopic machines, if designed to self-replicate, could get out of control, converting all matter on Earth into copies of themselves. It's like runaway yeast, but with robots. First described by Eric Drexler in 1986, it's now considered highly implausible, though still useful as a cautionary tale for advanced technologies. Electrum is a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver, sometimes with trace amounts of copper, used as early as 600 BCE to mint the first known metal coins in Lydia, a kingdom in what is now Western Turkey. Its pale, slightly greenish hue gave these coins a distinct appearance. Since it occurs naturally, ancient mints didn't need to refine it, making electrum both convenient and prestigious. The Sakharov conditions are 3 rules that any theoretical process must meet in order to explain why the universe is made mostly of matter and not antimatter. They include violations of baryon number C and CP symmetry and departure from thermal equilibrium. Without these, the Big Bang should have produced equal parts matter and antimatter, which would have promptly annihilated each other. The Peter Principle suggests that in any hierarchy, people tend to be promoted until they reach a position where they're no longer competent. Introduced in a 1969 satirical book by Lawrence J. Peter, the idea resonated with office workers everywhere. It's not that people are bad at everything, it's just that skills for one role don't always translate to the next rung on the corporate ladder. The Osgood-Schramm model of communication treats communication as a two-way, circular process. Rather than one person simply sending a message and the other receiving it, both participants continuously encode, interpret, and respond, like tossing a message back and forth. A shibboleth is any custom word or pronunciation that's used to distinguish insiders from outsiders. The term comes from a biblical story in which the pronunciation of shibboleth revealed who was from which tribe. Today, it might be a regional accent, jargon, or even a cultural reference that gives away where someone's from, or whether they belong to a certain group. The Regency crisis of 1788 unfolded when King George III of Britain experienced a severe bout of mental illness, rendering him unable to rule. Parliament debated whether his son, the Prince of Wales, should act as regent. But Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger resisted, fearing a power grab. Medium theory refers to approaches in communication studies that examine how the medium itself, not just the message, shapes human experience. Think of Marshall McLuhan's famous phrase, "The medium is the message." Whether it's print, television, or the internet, each medium alters the way we think, relate, and understand the world. Not just what we say, but how we say it, and through what channels. In 2008, researchers reverse-engineered the cryptographic algorithm used in London's Oyster card system, using nothing more than the data collected from tapping cards on readers. The MIFARE Classic chip had a vulnerability that allowed access to its encryption keys. This led to widespread discussions about transit security and digital privacy, highlighting how even a smart card for commuting can open the door to unintended consequences. A paratectic reaction occurs when a liquid and one solid phase combine to form a different solid phase as the material cools. It's common in metallurgy and crystallography, where alloy mixtures change phases at precise temperatures. For example, certain steel compositions undergo paratectic reactions during casting. The Aharonov-Bohm effect is a quantum phenomenon in which particles are influenced by an electromagnetic potential, even in regions where the actual electric and magnetic fields are zero. Imagine an electron being deflected around a magnetic field it never touches. This effect, confirmed in experiments, challenges classical assumptions and shows that in quantum mechanics, potentials themselves have physical significance, not just the fields. The Debye sheath is a thin layer that forms between a plasma and a solid surface it contacts, like a metal wall in a fusion reactor. It acts as an electrical buffer zone, where ions pile up and help balance the negative charge that typically builds on the wall. This sheath protects materials from damage, but it also makes engineering high-performance plasma systems significantly more complicated. The Byzantine generals problem is a thought experiment in computer science about how distributed systems can reach consensus even when some participants are unreliable or malicious. It's like several generals needing to coordinate an attack, but some might be traitors sending false messages. The problem inspired key advances in fault-tolerant computing and blockchain technology, where agreement is everything and trust is a luxury. Fraunhofer lines are the dark absorption bands seen in the sun's spectrum, first studied in detail by Joseph von Fraunhofer in the early 1800s. They occur because elements in the sun's cooler outer layers absorb specific wavelengths of light. By analyzing these lines, scientists identified elements like hydrogen and helium in the sun's atmosphere. It was one of the first clues that stars were made of the same stuff as Earth. The Drake equation is a way to estimate how many intelligent civilizations might be communicating in our galaxy right now. Proposed by Frank Drake in 1961, it breaks the problem into parts, like how many stars form each year, how many have planets, how many planets might support life, and so on. It doesn't give a definite answer, but frames the question scientifically. How likely are we to be alone? Orchomenus was an ancient city in Boeotia, Greece, known for its wealth during the Mycenaean era, sometimes called the Minyan Orchomenus. It rivaled Thebes and played a key role in early Greek mythology and trade. Archaeologists uncovered a Thalos tomb there, one of the largest ever found, suggesting powerful rulers once lived in this now quiet archaeological site near Lake Copace. The path integral formulation in quantum mechanics was introduced by Richard Feynman. It says that to find the probability of a particle going from one point to another, you have to consider every possible path it could take, not just the straight line. Each path contributes a tiny wave, and the total is found by summing them all. It's like the particle exploring every route simultaneously before choosing the final one. The Battle of Trafalgar, fought in 1805, was a decisive naval clash between the British Royal Navy and the combined French and Spanish fleets during the Napoleonic Wars. Led by Admiral Horatio Nelson, the British destroyed much of the enemy fleet without losing a single ship. Nelson was killed in action, but the victory ensured Britain's naval dominance for over a century and crushed Napoleon's plans to invade England. A topological quantum computer is a theoretical kind of quantum machine that stores information in the twists and braids of particles called anyons. These anyons only exist in two-dimensional systems and follow unusual rules when they're moved around each other, because their information depends on how they've been braided, not where they are. This model could be much more resistant to error than other quantum approaches. The anthropic principle is the idea that the universe's physical laws must allow for observers like us to exist, because if they didn't, we wouldn't be here to notice. There are weak and strong versions. The weak version simply states this as a tautology, while the strong version suggests the universe is somehow compelled to develop life. Either way, it's a way of reframing why do the laws of nature seem so precise. Length contraction is a concept in special relativity where objects moving at high speeds appear shorter along the direction of motion, at least from the perspective of a stationary observer. It's not that the object physically shrinks, but rather that space and time themselves are warped by motion. For example, a spacecraft moving near light speed would look compressed, like a flattened bullet, to someone watching from Earth. The base rate fallacy happens when people ignore general statistical information, the base rate, in favor of specific information. For instance, if a medical test is 99% accurate, but the disease is rare, a positive result doesn't mean you definitely have it. People tend to focus on the result and forget how rare the condition is, leading to big overestimations of risk or probability. The ADS/CFT correspondence is a conjecture in theoretical physics that links two very different types of theories, one in a space with gravity, anti-de Sitter space, and one without it, described by conformal field theory. First proposed by Juan Maldacena in 1997, it provides a kind of mathematical dictionary between gravity and quantum mechanics, and is considered one of the most important ideas in string theory. The traditional Mongolian script is written vertically from top to bottom and left to right, a rare combination among modern writing systems. It was derived from the old Uyghur script and has been used since the 13th century. Though it was replaced by Cyrillic during the Soviet era, it's still taught and used in Inner Mongolia and is making a cultural comeback in modern Mongolia. The Little Albert experiment, conducted in 1920 by John B. Watson and Rosalie Rayner, aimed to show that emotional responses could be conditioned in humans. They exposed a baby to a white rat and then paired it with a loud noise, causing fear. Eventually, the child feared the rat even without the noise. It was a landmark study in behaviorism, but also ethically troubling by today's standards. Quinine, the bitter compound in tonic water, was once the most effective treatment for malaria. Extracted from the bark of the cinchona tree, it was so crucial that British colonials in India mixed it with soda water and then added gin to make it more palatable. That mix, the gin and tonic, was born from medicinal necessity and remains one of the more refreshing side effects of disease control. The Munsell color system, developed by Albert H. Munsell in the early 20th century, organizes colors using 3 dimensions: hue, like red or green, value, how light or dark, and chroma, how vivid. It creates a sort of 3D color tree rather than a flat color wheel. Artists, designers, and soil scientists still use versions of it today because it separates color components in a way that's easy to understand and measure. A Veblen good is a product where demand actually goes up as the price increases, precisely because it's expensive. Named after economist Thorstein Veblen, It explains luxury items like designer handbags or rare watches, where part of the appeal is signaling status. It's a contradiction of basic economics, but perfectly rational if what you're buying isn't just a thing, but a social symbol. Benford's law says that in many sets of real-world numbers, the number 1 shows up as the first digit more often than 2, and so on down to 9. This strange but consistent pattern shows up in things like population sizes, stock prices, or electricity bills. It's even used to detect fraud. When data is faked, the digit frequencies often deviate from Benford's predicted curve. The Bic crystal pen has a tiny hole in the barrel. Not a design flaw, but a pressure equalizer. As ink flows, air has to move into the pen to replace it. Without that hole, the pen would eventually stop working or leak. It's a simple solution to a practical problem, and one reason this disposable pen design has remained basically unchanged since 1950. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's the real-world disaster that ended the age of dinosaurs. About 66 million years ago, an asteroid roughly 10 kilometers wide slammed into what's now Mexico, throwing dust into the atmosphere and blocking sunlight. Within years, nearly 75% of all species vanished, including the non-avian dinosaurs. In maritime law, flotsam and jetsam are not just poetic terms, they have specific meanings. Flotsam is wreckage that ends up floating after a ship sinks, while jetsam is cargo deliberately thrown overboard to lighten a ship in distress. There's also lagan, sunken cargo with a marker, and derelict, abandoned at sea. But flotsam and jetsam have drifted into common language as shorthand for discarded stuff. A pennon was a small triangular or tapering flag used by knights during the medieval period, usually attached to a lance. It identified the knight in battle and could display heraldic symbols or personal emblems. The Faraday effect is what happens when light passes through certain materials in the presence of a magnetic field. It causes the light's polarization to rotate. Discovered by Michael Faraday in 1845, it was the first experimental evidence that light and magnetism are connected, a key step toward electromagnetic theory. The Krasnikov tube is a speculative concept in general relativity for faster-than-light travel. The idea is to create a space-time shortcut by distorting the geometry of the universe along a specific path, like digging a trench through the fabric of space. It wouldn't allow a single trip to exceed light speed, but a round trip could take less time than light would need to make the same journey. A fire piston is a compact device that starts a fire using nothing but air pressure and a little physics. When the plunger is slammed into its cylinder, the air inside is rapidly compressed, heating up so fast that it ignites a bit of tinder, usually charcloth. It works on the same principle as a diesel engine's ignition. The heat death of the universe is a theoretical endgame in cosmology where everything just stops happening. It's not a fiery explosion or a dramatic collapse. Instead, the universe keeps expanding until energy is so evenly spread out that no work can be done. Stars die, particles decay, and all thermodynamic processes grind to a halt. It's the cold, quiet fade-out of all cosmic drama. In-group favoritism is the tendency to prefer people who belong to your own group, whether it's your team, culture, or even just people who like the same band. It can happen even in random group assignments, and studies show we often give more trust, empathy, or rewards to us rather than them. It's a fundamental part of social psychology and shows up everywhere, from schoolyards to geopolitics. A tontine was an 18th century financial plan that started out cooperative and turned competitive. People would pool money into an annuity, and as each member died, their share was divided among the survivors. The last person standing got it all. Solifluction is a slow, almost imperceptible type of landslide that happens when waterlogged soil oozes downhill over frozen or impermeable ground. Common in Arctic tundra and alpine environments, it looks like the land itself is sagging or rippling. Unlike a dramatic mudslide, solifluction creeps along year by year, forming lobes and terraces that geologists can read like slow-motion footprints. The Planck length is about 1.6 times 10 to the negative 35th meters, unimaginably small. So small, in fact, that the very concept of space might break down at that scale. It's thought to be the shortest measurable length in physics, beyond which quantum effects of gravity take over. If an atom were the size of the solar system, the Planck length would be about the size of a bacterium in comparison. Akrotiri is a Bronze Age settlement on the island of Santorini that was buried under volcanic ash around 1600 BCE. The eruption preserved the site so well that it's often called the Minoan Pompeii. Multi-story buildings, vibrant frescoes, and advanced plumbing systems show a remarkably sophisticated society. Yet no bodies were found, suggesting the people had warning and escaped before the disaster struck. Strongman competitions are tests of raw strength that often look more like construction work than sport. Competitors might carry massive stones, pull trucks, or hoist logs overhead. Events vary, but all require a mix of power, grip, and endurance. It's a modern evolution of feats of strength seen in traditional Highland games or Viking challenges, and still rooted in lifting things nature never intended. Creep is what happens when a solid material under constant stress very slowly deforms over time. It's why power lines droop in the summer, or why turbine blades in jet engines need to be carefully engineered. Unlike sudden failure, creep is a gradual shift, sometimes over decades. Engineers have to account for it in buildings, bridges, and pretty much anything that bears a load long term. The London equations, introduced by brothers Fritz and Heinz London in 1935, describe how superconductors respond to electromagnetic fields. They explain how superconducting currents flow without resistance and how magnetic fields are expelled from a superconductor, a phenomenon known as the Meissner effect. These equations laid the groundwork for understanding the strange, frictionless world of superconductivity. Buzkashi is a horseback sport played mainly in Central Asia, where players compete to drag a goat, or sometimes a calf, carcass across a field and into a goal. It's like polo, but with fewer rules, more chaos, and far more dust. Traditionally played by nomadic tribes, Buzkashi can last for hours and requires intense horsemanship, strategy, and strength, especially since there's no saddle to hang on to. Venera 13, launched by the Soviet Union in 1981, was the first probe to send back color panoramic images from the surface of Venus. It landed in 1982 and survived for 127 minutes in an environment hot enough to melt lead. The images showed a rocky, orange-hued landscape and were a technological triumph, especially considering that Venus crushes and cooks most spacecraft within minutes. The Stabat Mater is a 13th century Latin hymn reflecting on Mary's sorrow as she stands at the foot of the crucified Christ. The title means the mother was standing, and its emotional power has inspired composers for centuries. Pergolese's version, written in 1736, just before his death at age 26, is among the most haunting, while Dvořák's 19th century setting brings a full romantic sweep. The maelstrom of Saltstraumen, near Bodo in northern Norway, is one of the world's strongest tidal currents. About every 6 hours, nearly 400 million cubic meters of water rush through a narrow strait between fjords, reaching speeds up to 40 kilometers per hour. The result is a swirling, roaring current that looks like the ocean is boiling. Boats can, and do, navigate it, but only very carefully. The planning fallacy is our tendency to underestimate how long tasks will take, even when we've done similar tasks before. It's why construction projects run late and students start assignments the night before. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky coined the term in 1979, showing that we're often optimistic about our future selves, even in the face of past evidence. Renormalization is a set of methods in quantum field theory used to make sense of equations that would otherwise give infinite results. Physicists use it to clean up the math by redefining constants like mass or charge so that calculations agree with experiments. It's not just technical bookkeeping. Without it, theories like quantum electrodynamics would be uselessly infinite on paper. The Great Glen Fault runs diagonally across Scotland and has shaped much of its landscape, including the famous Loch Ness. It's a strike-slip fault, meaning the land on either side moves sideways past the other. It hasn't been active in recent centuries, but over millions of years it helped carve the deep valley that now slices across the highlands, linking the North Sea to the Atlantic. A coin can be both structural and decorative. Traditionally, it's the cornerstone in masonry construction, where two walls meet, and it often sticks out slightly to reinforce the joint. In classical architecture, coins are sometimes exaggerated with alternating stone sizes, adding visual interest while signaling stability. On modern buildings, they're often just for show, but still mimic the weight they once bore. Relevance theory is a model of communication developed by Dan Sperber and Deirdre Wilson in the 1980s. It argues that people interpret language by assuming speakers will provide just enough information to be relevant. No more, no less. Rather than decoding everything literally, we infer meaning based on what would make the most sense in context. It's why we get hints, jokes, or sarcasm with minimal effort. The Punic Wars were a trilogy of conflicts between Rome and Carthage from 264 to 146 BCE. They included Hannibal's famous crossing of the Alps with elephants, Rome's naval innovation, and finally, the complete destruction of Carthage. These wars transformed Rome from a regional power into a dominant empire and left behind the Latin phrase Carthago delenda est, meaning Carthage must be destroyed. A grain boundary is where two crystal structures meet in a solid material. Each side may be perfectly ordered, but where they touch, there's a misalignment. These boundaries affect properties like strength, conductivity, and corrosion resistance. In metallurgy and materials science, controlling grain boundaries can make the difference between a brittle alloy and a durable one. Think of turbine blades or skyscraper steel. The Winkel triple projection is a type of map that tries to balance three kinds of distortion: area, direction, and distance. No flat map can perfectly represent a round Earth, but the Winkel triple does a solid job of minimizing the errors all at once. That's why National Geographic adopted it in 1998. It looks wrong in fewer ways than most maps, even if Greenland still comes out a bit too big. Extortion is when someone obtains something, usually money, through coercion, threats, or abuse of power. It's different from theft because the victim technically hands the item over, but under pressure. Classic examples include blackmail, protection rackets, or threats of harm unless payment is made. The term bus and truck roadshow comes from theater lingo, referring to touring productions that weren't exactly Broadway material. These shows would travel in buses and trucks, often with scaled-down sets and lesser-known performers, hitting smaller cities and less glamorous venues. The upsilon meson is a particle made from a bottom quark and its corresponding antiquark, making it what's called flavor neutral. Its quark content cancels out in terms of charge and type. This heavy meson helped confirm the existence of the bottom quark. Click here to find out what else I found. What are you waiting for? Click it. Learn something. That's literally why you watch this channel. Have you ever wondered why walking into a bookstore can suddenly make you want to use the toilet? Or how a demon could break the laws of physics? The answers to these crazy questions? They're bound to leave your friends questioning reality itself. So buckle up. I'm the useless guy, your fact finder, and this is where curiosity meets chaos. Let's get facted up.
So many questions. Why is the world spinning? Why is the moon keeping its orbit? Can rockets fly backwards? The facts you didn't know you needed. The Useless Show.
In the early 20th century, a drink called Radithor was sold as a miracle cure for every ailment imaginable. It contained radium, the same radioactive element that glows in the dark. People thought it was a symbol of health and vitality, until industrialist Eben Byers drank so much of it that his bones literally began to decay from radiation poisoning. Between 1645 and 1715, the sun entered a strange phase known as the Maunder minimum. During this time, sunspots almost disappeared entirely. Astronomers of that era using primitive telescopes noticed how oddly quiet the sun became. This solar calm coincided with Europe's Little Ice Age, when winters grew harsher, linking our climate closely to solar behavior. On the Greek island of Kea lies Aia Irini, an archaeological site that once thrived as a Bronze Age settlement. Excavations reveal houses, sanctuaries, and intricate pottery that hint at its ties with the Minoan civilization of Crete. It's like uncovering a small but crucial chapter of early Aegean trade and culture, frozen in stone and soil for over 3,000 years. Valleytronics is a branch of physics that studies how electrons behave in different valleys of energy inside a semiconductor. Think of these valleys as lanes in a racetrack. Electrons can choose which one to move through. By controlling that choice, scientists hope to create faster and more energy-efficient electronic devices beyond what silicon chips can do today. The Higgs boson, often nicknamed the God particle, is the reason other particles have mass. Discovered in 2012 at CERN's Large Hadron Collider, it confirmed the last missing piece of the Standard Model. Without it, atoms, stars, and even you wouldn't exist. Matter itself would be like light, moving, without ever stopping to form anything solid. A Shepard tone is an auditory illusion where a sound seems to rise or fall endlessly in pitch, yet never actually does. It's created by layering multiple tones an octave apart, each fading in and out perfectly. The result tricks your brain, like a musical staircase that loops forever, often used in movies to build suspense or tension. The backfire effect describes how some people double down on their beliefs when shown evidence that contradicts them. It's a psychological defense. Instead of changing their mind, they reinforce their stance even more strongly. That's like arguing harder about the color of the sky because someone showed you a photo of it looking different. A Cottrell atmosphere forms when carbon and nitrogen atoms cluster around a dislocation in a metal's crystal lattice. Imagine tiny atoms gathering like a cloud around a crack, making it harder for the metal to deform. This microscopic behavior explains why some steels become stronger and less ductile after heat treatment. A megalith is a massive stone used in ancient monuments like Stonehenge. Some stand alone, while others form circles or tombs. They were built without modern tools, often weighing dozens of tons. The effort needed to move and position them shows just how determined ancient builders were to honor their gods, their dead, or the cosmos. The Dymaxion map, designed by Buckminster Fuller in 1943, reimagines the world as an unfolded icosahedron, a shape with 20 triangular faces. When flattened, it minimizes distortion, showing continents connected almost seamlessly. It's like turning Earth into an origami globe that finally tells a fair story of geography without favoring any country. The illusion of transparency is the tendency to overestimate how clearly others can read our emotions. For instance, when you're nervous giving a speech, you might think everyone sees it, but they usually don't. This mental bias makes us feel exposed when we're not, showing just how private our inner worlds really are. The Robbers Cave experiment, conducted in 1954, studied how group conflict forms and resolves. Researchers placed two groups of boys in a summer camp, sparking rivalry through competitions, then unity through teamwork. The study revealed how easily us versus them attitudes can form and how shared goals can bridge those divides. A fracture happens when stress causes a material to split into two or more pieces. From a broken bone to a shattered glass, it's the same principle. The internal force exceeds the material's strength. Engineers study fractures carefully to design stronger buildings, bridges, and tools that can resist such failure. The cesium chloride structure is a simple crystal lattice where each cesium ion sits at the cube's center, surrounded by chloride ions at the corners. It's a perfect geometric dance of positive and negative charges. This arrangement gives the compound its stability and helps chemists understand how ionic solids pack in three-dimensional space. In medieval England, the murdrum fine was a harsh law that punished an entire village if a Norman was found murdered there. It was meant to protect the ruling Norman elite after their conquest in 1066. The fine wasn't about finding justice, it was about keeping conquered people obedient through fear and collective responsibility. The Ehrenfest paradox explores what happens to a spinning disk in Einstein's theory of relativity. As the disk rotates faster, parts of its edge should contract due to length contraction, yet the circle's geometry doesn't quite add up. It's a thought experiment that exposes how motion can bend not just space, but logic itself. The Bethe-Feynman formula, created by physicists Hans Bethe and Richard Feynman, estimates the explosive yield of an atomic bomb. It's a mathematical shortcut that calculates how much energy a fission chain reaction can release. During World War II, it helped scientists predict the devastating power of the first nuclear weapons. Hindsight bias is the feeling that you knew it all along after something happens. For example, predicting a sports result after the match ends feels obvious, but only in retrospect. It's our brain rewriting memory to make sense of the past, turning uncertainty into false confidence. The two envelopes problem is a mind-bending puzzle in probability. You're given two envelopes, one with twice as much money as the other. Should you switch? Mathematically, arguments for both choices sound convincing, yet they contradict each other. It's a perfect example of how logic can sometimes loop back on itself. The Boltzmann brain thought experiment suggests that, given enough time, random particles could form a conscious brain floating in space, more likely than an entire universe, forming by chance. It's a strange idea that questions reality itself. Are we living in a natural universe? Or are we just one of those accidental minds? Hicks' law explains that decision-making slows down as the number of choices increases. Choosing between 2 snacks is quick, but 50 options? That takes longer. The law quantifies this delay, showing that our brains trade speed for certainty. The more options we have, the more time we need to think. Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, written in the late 1300s, was composed in Middle English, a version of the language that sounds foreign to modern ears. Phrases like "one that April with his showers soot" require training to read today. It's a window into English before Shakespeare shaped it into its familiar modern form. Berlin, the capital of Germany, has a history that reads like a century-long tug-of-war. From the Prussian Empire to the Berlin Wall and reunification in 1989, it's seen power rise and fall. Today, the city blends its past with modern art, technology, and culture, a living museum of resilience and reinvention. The oblique order is a clever military tactic where an army focuses its strength on one flank instead of attacking head-on. By doing this, it keeps the center and the opposite flank deliberately weaker. It's a risky move, like leaning too far to one side, but when done right, it overwhelms the enemy before they can react. Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark, blends old-world charm with modern design. The city's Little Mermaid statue gazes over its harbor, while Tivoli Gardens, one of the world's oldest amusement parks, brings color and music to its center. With bicycles outnumbering cars, it's a city that moves gracefully on 2 wheels. The Hagia Sophia in Istanbul stands as one of history's greatest architectural achievements. Built in the 6th century by Greek geometers Isidore of Miletus and Anthemius of Tralles, it served as a cathedral, then a mosque, then a museum, and is now once again a mosque. Its massive dome seems to float in midair, an engineering marvel that has inspired builders for over a millennium. The Battle of Stalingrad, fought from 1942 to 1943, was one of World War II's bloodiest clashes. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union battled for control of the city, with fighting that raged from the streets to the ruins. The Soviet victory turned the tide of the war, marking the beginning of Germany's downfall. The lever rule is a simple yet powerful tool in materials science. It helps determine how much of each phase exists in a 2-component system, like how much liquid and solid form in an alloy at a given temperature. It's called the lever rule because on a phase diagram, the math works like balancing a seesaw. The term nosy Parker, meaning a busybody, likely originated in late 19th century England as a slang term for a nosy or overly inquisitive person. Some folk stories link it to the Duke of Wellington, but there's no historical evidence for that connection. Over time, nosy Parker became the perfect term for anyone who just can't resist peeking into others' business. The Peierls transition describes a strange behavior in one-dimensional crystals. As temperature drops, the evenly spaced atoms shift slightly, distorting the lattice. This rearrangement lowers the system's energy and can turn a conductor into an insulator. It's a quiet structural rebellion, atoms reorganizing themselves to find stability. The Gla was a massive fortified site from the Mycenaean era, located in Boeotia, central Greece. Unlike most citadels, it wasn't built around a palace, but covered an entire plateau with towering walls. Archaeologists believe it once protected grain stores, showing the Mycenaean skill in both architecture and agricultural planning. A mod insulator is a material that should conduct electricity according to standard theory, but doesn't. In these substances, electrons repel each other so strongly that they freeze in place. This strange defiance of classical physics opened the door to understanding high-temperature superconductors and other quantum materials. Ravenna in northern Italy was once the capital of the Western Roman Empire. From 402 to 476, emperors ruled from this city's marshy defenses. Today, Ravenna is famous for its glittering Byzantine mosaics, where gold and glass still shimmer under the same domes that once sheltered Roman rulers. The Pygmalion effect shows how expectations can shape performance. When teachers or leaders believe someone will excel, that belief subtly influences behavior, boosting confidence and results. It's named after the Greek myth of Pygmalion, who fell in love with his own sculpture, which then came to life. a perfect metaphor for belief creating reality. Phaistos, located in south-central Crete, was a thriving Bronze Age palace city. Excavations there uncovered grand staircases, storage rooms, and the mysterious Phaistos disk, a clay artifact covered with spiral symbols still undeciphered. The site offers a glimpse into Minoan civilization's artistry and advanced urban planning around 1600 to 1700 BCE. The Klein-Gordon equation is a cornerstone of quantum physics. It extends Schrödinger's equation to fit Einstein's theory of relativity, describing particles that move close to light speed. While it originally aimed to explain the electron, it's now essential in modeling other quantum fields, including those in particle accelerators and cosmology. The Acasta gneiss, found in Canada's Northwest Territories, is among Earth's oldest known rocks. Formed about 4.03 billion years ago, it dates back to the planet's earliest crust. While it doesn't contain the oldest zircon crystals found on Earth, its minerals still record conditions from when the planet was just beginning to cool and solidify. The Sloan Great Wall, discovered in 2003, is a colossal structure of galaxies stretching over 1.5 billion light-years. It's one of the universe's largest known formations, a cosmic web so vast that light takes billions of years to cross it. On that scale, even galaxies look like tiny specks. The lever action mechanism of the Winchester rifle evolved from the earlier volcanic repeating pistol. While the volcanic design was unreliable, its innovative reloading system inspired later engineers. The Winchester perfected the idea, giving rise to the rifle that became iconic in the American West. Fast, sturdy, and deadly efficient. Judo, founded in 1882 by Jigoro Kano in Japan, transformed traditional jujutsu into a disciplined martial art. It emphasizes using an opponent's strength against them through throws, pins, and holds. Beyond combat, Judo teaches respect and self-control, values that helped it grow into an Olympic sport practiced worldwide. The Viking longship was a sleek, versatile vessel built for exploration and conquest. With its narrow frame, shallow hull, and single square sail, it could glide across oceans or up shallow rivers alike. These ships carried Norse warriors from Scandinavia to distant shores, shaping Europe's history one raid at a time. The Pali Canon is the foundational scripture of Theravada Buddhism, written in the ancient Pali language. Composed between the 3rd and 1st centuries BCE, it preserves the teachings of the Buddha in meticulous detail. Divided into 3 baskets, it remains one of the oldest complete collections of religious texts still studied today. Pilot wave theory, proposed by Louis de Broglie and later expanded by David Bohm, offers a deterministic view of quantum mechanics. It suggests that particles follow precise paths guided by a pilot wave. Unlike the randomness of mainstream quantum theory, though controversial, it provides an elegant, if unconventional, alternative to quantum uncertainty. Border Cave, in South Africa's KwaZulu-Natal region, is a rock shelter that preserves evidence of early modern humans. Artifacts found there, beads, tools, and remains, date back nearly 200,000 years. The site offers a rare look at how our ancestors lived, hunted, and even decorated themselves long before written history. Thagomisers are the rows of spikes on a stegosaur's tail used for defense. The term was humorously coined by cartoonist Gary Larson in his comic The Far Side, and scientists later adopted it officially. It's one of those rare cases where a joke entered scientific vocabulary and stayed. The atomic form factor measures how an atom scatters waves, such as X-rays or electrons. It's like the atom's fingerprint in diffraction experiments, revealing its internal structure. By analyzing these patterns, scientists can determine how atoms arrange in crystals, giving us detailed maps of materials down to the angstrom. The Byzantine Empire once amazed visitors with mechanical marvels in its throne room. Using hydraulics and hidden gears, golden lions roared, birds sang, and thrones rose magically into the air. These automata weren't toys, they were displays of divine authority, turning technology into theater long before modern robotics. A hypocaust was ancient Rome's version of central heating. Beneath the floors, furnaces pumped hot air through hollow spaces and walls, warming baths and villas alike. Wealthy Romans enjoyed this luxury centuries before radiators existed, a reminder that comfort engineering isn't a modern invention at all. The word humbug became popular in the 19th century thanks to showman P.T. Barnum. He used it to describe harmless trickery, the kind that entertained without truly deceiving. To Barnum, Humbug wasn't lying. It was a theatrical illusion, a wink to the audience that said, "You're in on the fun." The Gibbard-Satterthwaite theorem is a cornerstone of social choice theory. It proves that in any fair voting system with 3 or more candidates, one of 3 flaws must exist. A dictator decides the outcome. At least one candidate can never win, or voters can manipulate results by voting strategically. In short, perfect democracy is mathematically impossible. The Rashba effect occurs in 2-dimensional materials when spin bands split due to the combined influence of electric fields and electron motion. It's as if electrons feel a twist, separating into 2 paths depending on their spin direction. This phenomenon plays a crucial role in developing spintronic devices that use electron spin instead of charge. Arrow's impossibility theorem, proposed by economist Kenneth Arrow, shows that no voting system can perfectly translate individual preferences into a collective decision without breaking fairness rules. It's like trying to design a game where everyone wins. The math simply doesn't allow it. This result reshaped how economists and political scientists think about democracy. The McGurk effect reveals how our senses can trick us during speech perception. When the sound of one syllable is paired with the lip movements of another, our brain fuses them into something entirely new. For example, hearing ba while seeing gay can make us perceive dia. It's a perfect example of vision overpowering hearing. The Sutton Hoo helmet, discovered in a 7th century Anglo-Saxon ship burial in England, is a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Decorated with animal motifs and scenes of warriors, it served both as armor and as a symbol of power. Now housed in the British Museum, it remains one of the most iconic artifacts of early medieval Europe. An armillary sphere is a beautifully intricate model of the heavens, made of interlocking rings that represent celestial circles, like the equator and ecliptic. Ancient astronomers used it to visualize the movement of stars and planets around Earth or the Sun. It's essentially a 3-dimensional map of the sky, centuries before telescopes existed. Twister theory, developed by mathematician Roger Penrose, offers a new way to look at spacetime. Instead of describing points in space and time directly, it maps them into a different kind of geometric space called twistor space. This approach bridges quantum mechanics and relativity, 2 theories that rarely cooperate, through elegant mathematics. Boré sheep, a rare breed from the remote St. Kilda Islands of Scotland, are survivors of isolation. Small, hardy, and self-sufficient, they've kept traits lost in modern sheep, including the ability to shed their wool naturally. With fewer than a few hundred left, they're living links to the livestock of the Iron Age. Prospect theory, developed by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, explains why people fear losses more than they value gains. Losing $10 feels worse than winning 10 feels good. This asymmetry shapes decisions in gambling, investing, and everyday life, showing that humans aren't rational calculators. We're emotional risk-takers. The Battle of Midway, fought in June 1942, marked a turning point in the Pacific during the World War II. Just 6 months after Pearl Harbor, U.S. forces ambushed Japan's Navy, sinking 4 of its aircraft carriers. The victory shifted the balance of power, halting Japan's expansion and beginning the Allies' long push westward. A red sprite is a brief, ghostly flash of red light that appears high above thunderclouds. It's a type of transient luminous event, not a UFO, but an electrical phenomenon reaching up to 90 kilometers into the atmosphere. Seen from space or mountaintops, sprites flicker for only milliseconds, like lightning's silent cousins. Miller indices are a system used in crystallography to label the orientation of planes within a crystal lattice. They're written as 3 integers, such as 1, 1, 1, and help scientists describe how atoms are stacked in a solid. It's like giving every possible slice of a crystal its own precise street address. A photon is the smallest possible packet of light, the quantum particle that carries electromagnetic energy. Whether in sunlight, X-rays, or radio waves, photons are both waves and particles at once. They power photosynthesis, fiber optic internet, and even laser surgery. Tiny messengers that connect the universe through light. Dimini is a small village near Volos in Thessaly, Greece, famous for its Neolithic archaeological site. Excavations there revealed stone houses, pottery, and fortifications dating back to around 5000 BCE. These ruins show one of Europe's earliest examples of organized settlement, a window into humanity's first steps toward civilization. The Voigt effect occurs when a magnetic field applied at a right angle to light's path makes certain materials birefringent, meaning they split light into 2 rays. It's a subtle dance between magnetism and optics, revealing how even invisible forces can twist light's behavior in measurable ways. The Franco-Prussian War, fought between 1870 and 1871, pitted France's Second Empire against the rising power of Prussia. Prussia's victory united the German states into a single empire under Wilhelm I. The defeat humiliated France and set the stage for deep rivalries that later fueled World War I. The Lebombo bone, found in the Lebombo Mountains between South Africa and Eswatini, is one of humanity's oldest counting tools. Carved from a baboon fibula and marked with 29 notches, it dates back about 43,000 years. It's evidence that early humans were already using mathematics to track time or cycles, perhaps even the moon. The Hawthorne effect shows how simply being watched can change how people act. It began in the 1920s, when researchers studied factory workers in Illinois and noticed that productivity increased just because the workers knew they were being observed. It's like when students suddenly sit straighter when a teacher walks by. Awareness alone alters behavior, even without any real change in conditions. The fundamental attribution error happens when people assume someone's behavior reflects their personality rather than their situation. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you might think they're rude, not that they're rushing to the hospital. Psychologists call this bias fundamental because it's so common. We judge others' actions as character flaws, but excuse our own as circumstantial. The investiture controversy was a power struggle in medieval Europe between the papacy and monarchs over who had the right to appoint bishops. Starting around the 11th century, it pitted Pope Gregory VII against Emperor Henry IV. At its core, it was about authority, whether the church or the crown held ultimate spiritual influence. The conflict reshaped Europe's political and religious balance for centuries. Sturgeon's law, coined by science fiction writer Theodore Sturgeon, bluntly states that 90% of everything is crap. He said this in the 1950s to defend science fiction, arguing that all creative fields have the same problem. Most output is mediocre, but that last 10% makes the effort worthwhile. It's a humorous reminder that brilliance usually hides in the minority. The twin paradox in Einstein's theory of relativity describes how time moves differently depending on speed. Imagine identical twins. One travels through space near the speed of light, while the other stays on Earth. When the traveler returns, they're younger than their sibling. It's not magic, it's physics, showing that time itself stretches and bends with motion. Circular reasoning is a logical trap where the conclusion is the same as the premise, like saying, "I'm trustworthy because I always tell the truth." It sounds convincing, but explains nothing new. Philosophers use it as an example of flawed argumentation, a kind of intellectual loop where logic eats its own tail instead of proving a point. The Sotelo Hills in Botswana rise dramatically from the desert, covered in over 4,000 ancient rock paintings. Archaeologists believe people have lived and painted there for more than 20,000 years. Locals call them the Mountains of the Gods, seeing the site as sacred, a silent archive of humanity's earliest spiritual and artistic expressions. An Alfvén wave is a strange ripple that travels through plasma, the state of matter inside stars and space. Named after Swedish physicist Hannes Alfvén, it happens when charged particles oscillate along magnetic field lines, like beads vibrating on a stretched string. These waves help scientists understand how energy moves through the sun's atmosphere and beyond. The black hole information paradox asks what happens to information that falls into a black hole. According to quantum mechanics, information can't be destroyed, but general relativity says anything crossing the event horizon vanishes forever. This contradiction has puzzled physicists for decades, forcing them to rethink how gravity and quantum theory might eventually fit together. Forensic engineers use fractography, the study of fracture surfaces, to find out why materials break. By examining cracks in metal, glass, or plastic under a microscope, they can trace the failure back to a specific stress point. It's like reading a story written in shattered patterns, revealing whether a bridge, aircraft, or machine broke from fatigue, flaws, or force. Papyrus was the ancient world's version of paper, made from the pith of the papyrus plant that grew along the Nile. Egyptians sliced it into thin strips, pressed them together, and dried them in the sun. The result was smooth enough for ink and durable enough to last millennia, the ancestor of every notebook and scroll that followed. The main sequence is the long, stable phase in a star's life when it burns hydrogen into helium. On a chart of brightness versus color, stars in this phase form a clear diagonal band. Our sun sits comfortably along it, meaning it's in its prime, a kind of cosmic adulthood before eventually swelling into a red giant. The Shannon-Weaver model, created in 1949, describes communication as a linear process. A sender encodes a message, transmits it through a channel, and a receiver decodes it. Noise can distort it along the way. Though simple, this model became the foundation for everything from phone systems to social media algorithms, showing how all messages face the same risks of misunderstanding. The sleeper effect is a curious twist in persuasion psychology. It happens when a message initially dismissed, maybe because of an untrustworthy source, becomes more convincing over time. People forget where they heard it, but remember the idea itself. It's a slow, quiet shift, like a seed of belief taking root long after it was planted. Annealing is a heat treatment used to make metal or glass softer and more workable. The process involves heating the material, holding it at a steady temperature, then cooling it slowly. On a microscopic level, this lets atoms relax into a more stable arrangement. It's like giving metal a good night's sleep. It wakes up stronger and less brittle. Linus's law, named after Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, says, "Given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow." In open source software, more people reviewing code means more chances to find and fix errors. It's the digital equivalent of teamwork. Proof that collaboration often uncovers what individual expertise might overlook. The anti-fluorite structure is a crystal arrangement where the positions of cations and anions are swapped compared to the fluorite structure. In fluorite, calcium ions form the framework. In anti-fluorite, smaller ions take that role instead. This simple inversion changes the material's electrical and optical behavior, showing how atomic geometry quietly shapes a solid's properties. The St. Petersburg paradox is a thought experiment about risk and value. It describes a coin flip lottery with infinite expected winnings, yet most people wouldn't pay much to play. Introduced in the 18th century, it forced economists to rethink how humans perceive money, revealing that psychological satisfaction matters more than pure mathematical payoff. The doctrine of Cypre lets courts modify charitable trusts when the original goal can't be achieved. For instance, if a fund meant to cure a specific disease becomes irrelevant, a judge can redirect it to a related cause. The phrase means as near as possible in French, preserving the donor's intent even when reality shifts. Miasma theory once claimed that diseases like cholera or plague came from bad air or foul smells. Before germ theory emerged in the 19th century, doctors genuinely believed that cleaning up odors would stop epidemics. Though wrong, it accidentally improved sanitation, a misunderstanding that helped pave the way for modern public health. Rome's Basilica of St. Paul, outside the walls, holds a circular portrait of every pope in history, displayed in a long glowing gallery. Each medallion is carefully labeled, forming a visual timeline of papal succession. Intriguingly, space remains for future popes, a quiet architectural acknowledgement that history, like faith, is still unfolding. CPT symmetry is a cornerstone of modern physics. It states that if you reverse charge, flip spatial coordinates, and run time backward, the laws of physics remain unchanged. This triple symmetry, charge, parity, and time ties together matter and antimatter, ensuring that even the strangest corners of the universe still play by consistent rules. The Carnation Revolution in 1974 was a peaceful military coup in Portugal that ended nearly 5 decades of dictatorship. Soldiers placed carnations in their gun barrels instead of bullets, symbolizing a bloodless change. Within hours, the Estado Novo regime collapsed and democracy was restored, a rare revolution remembered more for flowers than for fighting. The Galatea effect describes how a person's belief in their own ability can directly influence their performance. It's a psychological mirror. When people expect themselves to succeed, they often do. Named after the myth of Galatea, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy turned inward, showing that confidence isn't just motivation. It's measurable performance fuel. Egocentric bias is our habit of seeing the world through a personal lens. It makes us overestimate our contributions, assume others share our views, or downplay their efforts. In group projects, it's why everyone thinks they did most of the work. Psychologists see it as a mental shortcut. Our brains just default to the me perspective. Rocco's basilisk is a chilling thought experiment about a hypothetical future super-intelligent AI that might punish anyone who didn't help bring it into existence. It's not a real theory, more a philosophical puzzle about ethics, technology, and fear. Still, it sparked debates about how far logic can go when mixed with imagination and existential anxiety. Brooks's law in software management says that adding manpower to a late project makes it later. Coined by Fred Brooks in 1975, it highlights how coordination costs grow faster than productivity. Like too many cooks in a kitchen, extra programmers must first learn the code and communicate, slowing things down instead of speeding them up. The Chaman Fault stretches over 850 kilometers through Pakistan and Afghanistan, marking a major boundary between the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates. It's one of South Asia's most active fault zones, responsible for powerful earthquakes. The land there is slowly grinding northward, a reminder that continents, though massive, never really stand still. The Oort cloud is a vast theoretical shell of icy bodies orbiting the sun from about 2,000 to 200,000 astronomical units away. It's believed to be the source of long-period comets that occasionally dive into the inner solar system. Think of it as a frozen frontier, the distant edge of the sun's gravitational reach. The word deadline has a surprisingly dark origin. During the American Civil War, prison camps drew literal lines on the ground. Any prisoner crossing them was shot. Over time, the word shifted from a boundary of death to a boundary of time. Today's deadline pressure feels harsh, but thankfully, it's no longer fatal. A closed time-like curve is a theoretical loop in space-time that allows an object to return to its own past. In Einstein's general relativity, such paths could exist near extreme conditions like rotating black holes. It's a mathematical way of saying time travel isn't impossible, just very difficult to survive, let alone engineer. Shear strength measures how well a material resists sliding forces that cause layers to slip past one another. It's the property that keeps bolts from snapping, metal beams from twisting, or soil from collapsing under stress. Engineers test it constantly, because in the real world, failure often doesn't pull things apart, it slides them apart. Fitz's law predicts how long it takes to move to a target area based on its size and distance. Developed in 1954, it's crucial in human-computer interaction, explaining why bigger buttons are easier to click and why touchscreen keyboards are designed the way they are. It's motion math, quietly shaping every digital gesture. A Portolan chart was a medieval sailor's best friend, a detailed nautical map covered with radiating compass lines called rhomblines. Drawn on parchment, these charts helped navigate the Mediterranean with surprising accuracy long before longitude was understood. They're proof that skilled observation and geometry once steered ships better than any jeep. Declinism is the belief that society is getting worse, that the past was somehow better. It's an emotional bias rather than a factual one, often fueled by nostalgia or media negativity. Psychologists say it's common because people notice problems more than progress. In reality, history tends to improve unevenly, not collapse entirely. Precipitation hardening is a heat treatment that strengthens alloys like aluminum or steel. The process involves heating, cooling, and reheating to form tiny particles within the metal's structure that block movement of dislocations. It's a microscopic defense system. By rearranging atoms just slightly, engineers make airplanes and machinery far tougher than raw metal alone. The XYZ affair of 1797 saw U.S. diplomats insulted by French agents, demanding bribes just to start negotiations. The scandal, nicknamed for the anonymous X, Y, and Z, outraged Americans and led to an undeclared naval conflict called the Quasi-War. It revealed how fragile diplomacy could be in the young republic's early years. The Venetian arsenal in the 12th century was one of history's first assembly lines. Workers built warships using standardized parts and efficient organization, allowing them to launch a fully equipped galley in a single day. It was medieval mass production, centuries before Ford's factory, turning Venice into a maritime powerhouse. Eccentricity describes how much an orbit deviates from a perfect circle. A value of 0 means circular, while higher numbers indicate more stretched ellipses. Earth's orbit, for example, is almost round at 0.0167, but comets often reach near 1. It's a simple number that decides whether a world's path is smooth or wildly looping. Gurnia is an ancient Minoan town on Crete, often called the Pompeii of the Bronze Age because of its well-preserved layout. Excavated in the early 1900s, it reveals streets, houses, and a central palace complex. The The site offers a rare snapshot of daily life in a civilization that thrived over 3,000 years ago. The Crimean War, fought from 1853 to 1856, pitted Russia against an alliance of France, Britain, the Ottoman Empire, and Sardinia. Fought largely on the Crimean Peninsula, it's remembered for the charge of the Light Brigade and for sparking modern nursing through Florence Nightingale's work. The war reshaped European power dynamics and military medicine alike. Postel's Law, named after internet pioneer John Postel, advises software designers to be conservative in what you send, liberal in what you accept. It means programs should follow strict rules when sending data, but tolerate slight errors when receiving it. That flexibility made the early internet resilient, more handshake than standoff between machines. The $, that familiar $, likely evolved from an old Spanish-American peso abbreviation, PS. Over time, the flowing script merged the S over the P, eventually simplifying into the modern symbol. It's a little reminder that even our money signs began as messy handwriting on trade documents centuries ago. Kirboli is a secret language once used by Kashmiri coppersmiths to guard their craft and business dealings. Developed generations ago, it blended local dialects into a code outsiders couldn't decipher. Beyond words, it was a shield, a way to protect trade secrets in a world where knowledge meant survival. The Martha Mitchell effect describes when someone is labeled delusional for telling a truth that simply sounds unbelievable. Named after Martha Mitchell, the wife of a U.S. Attorney General who exposed political corruption, it highlights how reality can sound like madness until it isn't. Sometimes, the wildest story turns out to be true. Philokopi is an ancient archaeological site on the Greek island of Milos, once a thriving Bronze Age settlement. Excavations have revealed houses, pottery, and even a sanctuary with striking wall paintings. It stood at the crossroads of Aegean civilizations, a forgotten city whispering stories of trade, art, and daily life over 3,000 years ago. The Cochrane-Mantel-Hansel test is a statistical method used to analyze categorical data divided into layers or strata. Think of it as a way to find real relationships while controlling for background factors, like testing a drug's effect across multiple hospitals. It's the math behind careful comparisons, ensuring numbers tell a fair story. Before modern synthesizers, Soviet scientists built the ANS synthesizer, a bizarre machine that turned light into sound. Composers painted shapes on glass plates, and photoelectronic sensors converted those patterns into haunting tones. Created in the 1950s, it produced eerie, futuristic music that seemed decades ahead of its time, literally drawing sound from light. The Battle of Hastings, fought on October 14, 1066, reshaped English history. William, Duke of Normandy, defeated King Harold's forces in a brutal clash near Hastings, using archers, infantry, and cavalry. Harold's death marked the start of Norman rule and the end of Anglo-Saxon England, changing language, law, and culture forever. The Taiping Rebellion from 1850 to 1864 tore through southern China in one of the deadliest wars in history. Led by Hong Xiuquan, who claimed divine inspiration, it sought to replace the Qing dynasty with a heavenly kingdom. The conflict killed tens of millions, leaving cities ruined and dynasties shaken. In the medieval law book Saxonspiegel, an odd illustration shows animals, a beetle, a woodpecker, and others, presenting their cases before a court. It's both whimsical and symbolic, a reminder that even in the 13th century, artists used satire to comment on justice, morality, and the human tendency to act like beasts in court. The lost colony of Roanoke was England's first attempt at settling the New World, and one of its greatest mysteries. Founded in 1587 on what's now North Carolina's coast, the colony vanished within 3 years. When ships returned, they found only one word carved into a post: Croatoan. The people were never seen again. The theory of everything is the physicist's ultimate dream, a single framework, uniting general relativity and quantum mechanics. It would explain everything from black holes to atoms under one elegant equation. Decades of work have brought candidates like string theory, but so far, the universe still keeps its deepest secret unsolved. A torquetum was a medieval astronomer's multi-purpose gadget, part armillary sphere, part calculator. It could measure the positions of celestial objects and convert them between coordinate systems. Crafted from brass, it was like a 3D trigonometric computer, letting scholars map the heavens long before telescopes or digital models existed. Cosmic inflation describes a moment right after the Big Bang, when the universe expanded faster than light itself in a fraction of a second. This burst of growth explains why space looks smooth and uniform today. It's as if the universe started with a bang, then immediately pressed fast forward on creation. The medieval unit of land called a hide wasn't about size, but sustenance. It was simply enough farmland to support one family. In practice, that meant anywhere between 60 and 120 acres. The term blended economy and survival, reminding us that ancient land was measured not in meters but in meals. The doomsday clock is a symbolic countdown to global catastrophe, maintained since 1947 by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. Each move of its minute hand reflects humanity's risk, from nuclear war to climate change. When it nears midnight, it's not about time itself, but how close we are to ending it. Apophenia is the mind's talent, or curse, for finding patterns in randomness. It's what makes us see faces in clouds or connect unrelated events as fate. The brain evolved to spot meaning, even when none exists. Its creativity and paranoia rolled into
one. Imagination seeing order in the noise. The Morosi is a mysterious, possibly mythical, spotted lion said to roam the highlands of East Africa. Reports describe it as smaller and more patterned than typical lions. Though no specimen has ever been confirmed, stories persist. A ghost, a dose of evolution, somewhere between known biology and whispered legend. The Great Sumatran Fault cuts the entire island of Sumatra like a geological scar. Stretching more than 1,900 kilometers, it marks where tectonic plates grind past each other, generating massive earthquakes. It's a reminder that even the most solid-looking ground can, quite literally, be on the move beneath our feet. The rebound effect occurs when technology meant to save resources ends up encouraging more use instead. Like when fuel-efficient cars make people drive more, canceling out savings. It's a paradox of progress. Efficiency alone doesn't guarantee conservation unless behavior changes too. Nitinol is a nickel-titanium alloy with almost magical properties. Bend it, twist it, or crush it, then heat it, and it snaps back to its original shape. Discovered in 1959, it's used in medical stents, eyeglass frames, and robotics. It's metal with memory, literally remembering what it used to be. For over 1,000 years, the Egyptian port city of Thonis Herakleion lay hidden beneath the Mediterranean. Rediscovered in 2000, its ruins revealed statues, temples, and ancient ships preserved underwater. Once a major trade hub, it sank after earthquakes and floods. A lost city, quietly sleeping beneath the sea. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is a colossal underwater mountain range that runs down the center of the Atlantic Ocean. It's where tectonic plates pull apart, creating new oceanic crust. Stretching for more than 16,000 kilometers, it's a scar of creation, the place where the Earth's surface is literally born from molten rock. Space-time fuses 3 dimensions of space with one of time into a single 4-dimensional fabric. In Einstein's relativity, this fabric bends around mass, creating gravity. It's a simple yet mind-bending idea that space and time aren't separate stages, but threads in the same cosmic tapestry. The Roman gladius was a short, double-edged sword designed for thrusting in close combat. Carried by legionaries, it was deadly efficient, light, balanced, and ideal for tight formations. Inspired by Greek and Iberian blades, it became the symbol of Roman discipline and dominance, a small weapon that built an empire. Quantum annealing is like teaching a computer to relax its way to the best answer. Instead of testing every possibility, it slowly lowers its energy, letting the system naturally settle into the lowest point, the global minimum. It's inspired by physics, where atoms arrange themselves into stable states, and is often used for optimization problems too complex for classical computing. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation is one of physics' strangest attempts to blend quantum mechanics with Einstein's general relativity. It tries to describe the entire universe as a quantum system, but there's a twist. The equation doesn't include time. That means, in its terms, the universe just is, existing all at once without a ticking clock. Hidden variable theory is an attempt to make sense of quantum weirdness. It suggests that particles don't behave randomly. We just don't see all the hidden factors controlling them. Einstein famously supported this idea, arguing that God does not play dice, but experiments later hinted that nature might actually be stranger and more random than he hoped. The IKEA effect is what happens when people love something more, just because they helped make it. From building a table to assembling a model, our brains value effort. It's like we assign emotional worth to the sweat we put in. even if the result's a bit crooked. That's why half-built IKEA furniture somehow feels like an accomplishment. Malia is a sunny coastal town on Crete's northern shore, once home to one of the island's great Minoan palaces. Thousands of years ago, it buzzed with trade and art, its people carving seal stones and crafting gold jewelry. Today, it's a mix of ancient ruins and modern resorts, history and holiday sharing the same beach. A geoglyph is basically a giant artwork drawn on the earth itself. Think of the Nazca lines in Peru, those massive figures of birds and monkeys visible only from the sky. Ancient people created them by removing surface stones, leaving lighter soil exposed. It's one of the earliest forms of landscape-scale human expression. The Little Ice Age was a few centuries of unusual cold that gripped parts of Earth after the medieval warm period. Rivers like the Thames froze, crops failed, and even paintings from the era show snowy villages and frozen canals. It wasn't a true ice age, but it sure made Europe feel like one for a while. In the 1700s, inventors built mechanical marvels called automata, intricate self-operating machines. One of the most famous was the digesting duck, a lifelike creation that could flap its wings, peck grain, and even digest it. It was part science, part spectacle, a glimpse of robotics centuries before the word existed. Those slow-motion shots of bullets slicing through objects aren't magic. They're filmed with ultra-high-speed cameras capturing thousands of frames per second. At that speed, something that happens in the blink of an eye stretches into seconds of stunning detail, revealing shockwaves, fractures, and impacts too fast for human sight. In 1983, the Byford Dolphin diving bell accident became one of the most horrific incidents in diving history. A single mistake during decompression caused explosive pressure loss, instantly killing 5 divers. How unforgiving the physics of deep-sea work can be. Even a second's error can mean disaster. Parchment is writing material made from the carefully prepared skins of animals like sheep or goats. Before paper became common, it was prized for durability. Medieval scribes used it for everything from Bibles to royal decrees. Its smooth yet resilient surface preserved words that still survive centuries later. Anchoring bias is the mental glitch where our brains cling too tightly to the first piece of information we see. Say you're told a shirt costs $200, then it's discounted to $100. It feels like a deal, even if it's overpriced. That first number quietly shapes every judgment that follows. May's theorem, named after mathematician Kenneth May, says that in a 2-candidate election, simple majority rule is the only fair system that's anonymous, neutral, and consistent. In other words, if everyone gets one vote, and more than half prefer one option, that's the only method that treats all voters equally. The Leidenfrost effect explains why water droplets dance across a blazing hot pan instead of evaporating instantly. A thin cushion of vapor forms beneath the droplet, letting it skate and hiss like it's floating. It's physics' playful way of showing how heat and pressure can create their own little hovercraft. Wrestling is one of humanity's oldest sports, a physical chess match of strength, speed, and technique. From ancient Greek Olympians to modern Olympic wrestlers, it's about leverage and timing more than raw power. Every hold, throw, and pin tells a story of balance, control, and sheer determination. The argument from ignorance is a logical trap, assuming something's true just because it hasn't been proven false. It's like saying aliens must exist because no one's proved they don't. In logic, silence isn't evidence. It's just silence. Barmbrack is a traditional Irish fruitcake with a twist. It hides fortunes inside. Coins, rings, or bits of cloth were baked into it for Halloween, each symbol foretelling something about the eater's future. It turned dessert into a little game of fate, where every bite came with suspense. The Gibbons-Hawking effect reveals that even empty space near cosmic horizons isn't really empty. It hums with thermal energy. Stephen Hawking and Gary Gibbons showed that space-time curvature gives vacuum energy a temperature, meaning the universe itself can glow with invisible warmth at its edges. Causal set theory proposes that space-time isn't smooth, but built from discrete points, like pixels forming reality's fabric. Instead of a continuous flow, it suggests every event connects in a vast cosmic network. It's one of physics' boldest attempts to explain gravity in quantum terms. An obelisk is a tall stone monument that narrows to a pyramid-shaped tip. The ancient Egyptians carved them from single granite blocks, raising them as symbols of the sun god Ra. Centuries later, their sleek design inspired structures from Rome to Washington, D.C., still standing as echoes of timeless engineering. The mere exposure effect is a quiet quirk of the human brain. The more we see something, the more we tend to like it. Whether it's a song, a face, or a logo, familiarity builds comfort. It's why advertisers repeat images endlessly. Our minds confuse repetition with trust. The Younger Dryas was a sudden cold snap that hit Earth about 12,900 years ago, just as the last ice age was ending. Temperatures plummeted in mere decades, reshaping climates and civilizations. It's one of history's most dramatic reminders of how abruptly nature can shift gears. The ergosphere is a strange, swirling region that sits just outside a rotating black hole's event horizon. In this zone, space itself is dragged around by the black hole's spin, so much that nothing can stay still. Objects caught here must rotate with it, making the ergosphere one of the weirdest places in physics. Goodhart's law is a warning for anyone who loves metrics. It says, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. In other words, once people start gaming the numbers instead of improving the system, the numbers stop reflecting reality. Something every economy, school, or company eventually learns. Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, is often called the place where East meets West. Ottoman mosques, Austro-Hungarian architecture, and modern European streets coexist in one city. It's also where a single event, the 1914 assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, sparked World War I, changing history forever. The Dirac Sea is a theoretical model that imagines the vacuum as an infinite ocean of negative energy particles. Proposed by physicist Paul Dirac, it helped explain the existence of antimatter. The idea is that when one of those negative particles is knocked out, what's left looks like a positively charged particle, a positron. Forgery is more than fake signatures. It's the art of deception in physical form. It can mean falsifying documents, artwork, or even statistics, all with the intent to mislead. From counterfeit money to forged treaties, it's been both a criminal craft and a historical force for centuries. The birthday problem sounds simple, but surprises nearly everyone. In a group of just 23 people, there's about a 50% chance that 2 share the same birthday. It's all about probability. As the group grows, the number of possible birthday pairings skyrockets faster than intuition expects. The predestination paradox plays tricks with time travel logic. Imagine someone travels back to stop a disaster, only to cause it themselves. Their attempt to change history becomes part of the history they were trying to fix. It's one of those eerie loops where cause and effect chase each other in circles. Lagrange points are spots in space where gravity balances perfectly between 2 large bodies, like the Earth and the Sun. Objects parked there can hover in place using minimal fuel. NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, for instance, orbits near one such point, L2, a gravitationally quiet spot a million miles away. Survivorship bias is the logical mistake of focusing only on successes while ignoring failures. It's like studying only surviving planes from World War II and reinforcing the wrong parts. The lesson: to understand what works, you must also look at what didn't make it through. Lake Mungo is a dry, ancient lake in New South Wales, Australia, famous for some of the oldest human remains found in the region. The site holds evidence of people living there over 40,000 years ago, revealing early rituals, footprints, and a deep glimpse into human prehistory. Maxwell's demon is a thought experiment that dares to defy thermodynamics. It imagines a tiny creature sorting fast and slow gas molecules to create a temperature difference, effectively producing energy from nothing. It doesn't really exist, but it still challenges how scientists think about entropy and information. The telltale in a traditional pipe organ is a small moving indicator that tells the organist how much wind pressure remains in the reservoir. Before electricity, someone had to manually pump air into the organ. The telltale ensured the player didn't run out of breath, literally, mid-performance. The Thames Barrier is one of the world's largest movable flood defenses, protecting London from tidal surges. Each of its massive steel gates, shaped like curved cylinders, can rotate upward to block the river. When the danger passes, they sink back down to rest flat on the riverbed. The Mariko Aoki phenomenon is Japan's most peculiar mystery: the sudden urge to defecate when entering a bookstore. No one knows exactly why, but theories range from the smell of paper and ink to the calm environment triggering a parasympathetic response. It's odd, but surprisingly common. Keel hauling was one of the cruelest punishments in maritime history. A sailor would be tied with ropes and dragged beneath the ship's hull, scraping against barnacles and timbers. Few survived. It was meant to enforce discipline, but it mostly served as a terrifying warning to everyone else aboard. Royal tennis, the ancestor of modern tennis, was played indoors with sloping roofs, stone walls, and oddly shaped windows that acted as scoring zones. Kings and nobles once competed fiercely in these echoing courts, hitting handmade balls with wooden rackets. It's a game where geometry meets royalty. The Schrödinger equation is the backbone of quantum mechanics. It describes how a system's wave function evolves, essentially predicting how particles behave on a microscopic scale. Just as Newton's laws describe motion for planets, Schrödinger's equation does the same for electrons and atoms, only in probabilities instead of certainties. A frame, in sociology and communication theory, is a lens through which people interpret reality. It shapes what we notice and how we explain events. Two people can see the same situation, say a protest, yet interpret it differently depending on the frame they use to understand the world. Buckminster fullerene, or C, is a molecule shaped like a soccer ball, 20 hexagons and 12 pentagons forming a carbon cage. Discovered in 1985, it was named after architect Buckminster Fuller, whose geodesic domes share the same structure. It opened the door to nanotechnology and new carbon materials. The maritime signal flag for the letter J, called Juliet, carries a grave message at sea. It means, I am on fire and have dangerous cargo. Keep clear and send help. Each flag in maritime code tells a story of urgency or status, but Juliet's is among the most dire. Sorbethane is a squishy-looking synthetic polymer that acts like both a liquid and a solid. It's incredibly good at absorbing shocks and vibrations, used in everything from running shoes to industrial machines. Drop a steel ball on it and it barely bounces. That's how efficiently it eats energy. And that's it for today's round of weird and wonderful facts. I'm the useless guy, your fact finder. And if your brain feels slightly broken but kinda happy about it, then my job's done. Hit that like button, drop your favorite fact below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay curious.